Well, for all of you who are sitting here, I think you're quite aware that by listening to this class or attending the classes here, your main objective is to study the Dharma, contemplate and practice the Dharma. And to do that, you have to plan your time accordingly. It is the best if you can arrange some time to study the teachings that you've never studied before. And or you can familiarize yourself or practice upon the teachings you've studied before. In this way, it is quite meaningful. I know many of you, in fact, don't have a firm foundation in the Dharma studying and contemplation. So let it be Five Treatises or Sutrayana and Mantrayana teachings. If you really want to receive those teachings, I think it is the best if you can receive it from a genuine spiritual teacher, such as Kenpos and Kemos, and or you can listen to the teachings that was recorded before or read the commentaries. In this way, you can study. You can accomplish the Dharma studies that you wish to receive. I really hope that you don't escape or don't give up because of little difficulties and little hardships. To have a human life like this is really difficult, and to have an opportunity to listen to the Dharma is very difficult, and we never know how long we have, and we have very limited opportunity to study the Dharma. So in the limited opportunity, in limited lifetime, we should generate the limitless merits. So I'll give you the oral transmission.
Digbra Kibayina Digbra Sha, Sanchin Chikchi Lambda, Goa Tom Namdan Dro Sha, Lohun Jinam Tomden, the Lodan Dambe Lichja, Dan, Kavala Sotin Sha, Sormu Signa, Jama Sha, Kawa Jadan Licha, Dan, Jadan Nila Soba, Dan, Chang Hundan Dro Sha, Devin Tarna Jibdir Sha, the Insan Jud, the Insan Mujunana, Mam Tarana. Mam Tarngar number Sha, Zandab Keeper Sha, Yushir, Keper, Gina, Tsigyang, Jota, Lama Lana, Kapsar, Gavjan, Gavjan, Chief Joshi, La, Tarmo Jajan, Mayan Sha, Lami Go, and Yamber Sha, Gutang Lapa Lasso, Ba, Labi Kana, Gabra Sha, Shava Zuni, Jamba Yi, Tsitakina, Libera Sha, then the Turban, the Badan, Kusu Surgeon, Dambadan, Pizzi. Tarmo Jerva Yi, Nyan So, Dola, Sura, some Dava, Nim Kurshuba, Tamchilla, Yen Narjil Mebersha, Mozanjik Jib Damba Yi, Vagma Sarvi, Cernesha, Gabala Soshava, Gun, Tombim Dunder Powersha, Zayan Tinti Shava, Ranga Tagala, Dorver Sha, Ravni Jirkur Janchata, Loma the Chapar Nam, Yerter Lama, Nina, Jima Navar Mersha, Go. Janji Lasso Chotopa taken Lama Lama taken Lama Namla Wara Ti Taba Lani no Jantalan Chivdir Shah Lami Luma Lumar Mana Luma Lamim Dunda Mana Yimker Tardam Dambadan Shakso Sheba Lobra Shah Lohon Lana Kambra Dan Lami Jana Kansarpa Tela Tutti Lagni Jiv, Lodan Dambe, Lombersha, Chamber Jigme Tenpe Rango Kamshut, Lapson Bear, Punji, Ramshu, Lende Ba, Gave, Panson of Lobersha, Navi, Lami, Shava, La, Tati Jima, Nover Young, Kabar Namna Shada, she Yang, Gasam Danla, Digman Yer, Derma, Mava, Jeju Go, Lama Jib, Kayan Ba, Mershi, Memni, Shit, Ba, Gunpang, No, Tetan, Telam, Bat, Dave Shet. Dodrupchen Jigme Tenpe Nyima Nerungu Tamjiti Lama Yonsum Nibra Sha Samba Tagbe Loma Kumchokson Lapson Lami Jisin Jigbana Katon Jarver Jimber Sha Deni Ngsu Jimba Yi Damchu Snot Shenis Savi Tonga Jijan Lockdown Zimba Nit Sha Teter Lami Jinji Lobma Mali Panuki the Lo Stun Medan Dovshi Bi Gavam Tai Dak Jipsaba Din Roakum Kun near Dinan Drogan near the Gerger Lamarangapse or Logan Jimbo Starian Jim Zabar Zoxo or Jagger Jim Kambo Bamakara Guarda Jichinji Lozava Gerlong Rinchen Zambu.
Well, that was the oral transmission of 50 stanzas on following the teacher, composed by Ashwagosha. In fact, as a Buddhist, I think it is quite important for us to study it. Today, I've given you the oral transmission, and this text has 50 stanzas only. Therefore, I really wish that you could take the time to study it, because it would be rather very meaningful. Because only receive the oral transmission is not enough. You have to study it with a Kenpo or Kenmo. Many people don't understand how to rely on a spiritual teacher at all. After receiving the Dharma, but not understanding how to relate to a teacher, can you attain enlightenment? Can you gain realization that way? It's very difficult. In one of the chapters I translated from Wish-Fulfilling Treasury by Lung Chenpa, I think many Kenpos and Kenmos tutored you on that. Now, though we don't have that much time to talk about this, but the previous masters all placed great importance on how to relate to spiritual teacher. Same as commentary on Resting the Mind and Words of My Perfect Teacher and so on. But in this particular text, in fact, it has quite a few key texts. I also translated the commentary on this text. But today, I only give you the oral transmission for the stanzas. Next time, I really hope that you can reflect on yourself and how you relate to a teacher. Now, I'll give you the oral transmission of Transforming Suffering and Happiness.
Balayang Nite, Kanzup Laptene, Kanzup Laptembana, Devatan, Devi Yerkin, Shongwitsena, Tiwan, the Shorna, Kanjakdan, Jirbadan, Lelo La Sopan Penny, Lamla, Varchet, Vartak Chopreshete, Patambe, Mernam Gikilla, Kerchon, Digla, Kerchi, Sombartat, and Diwan, Mandrova, Kago, Tifsher, Dongobote, Martabadan, Dingervi, Number Gotamani, Tela, Stushi Chimbo, Kete, Yed Vermele, Loba Lam, Batja, Yang the Yamda, there's 3 trip you danger time to them, Nokchonla, Yamu Mambotam, Jera Yun Moki, Wonjang, Gazilla Yondan Yote, Tumbe, Dingerity, Round, Yamber, me, Shanch of Jabana, Chief Gago. Dever of Nebi, Shanch of Jabana, Chief Lover, Sonde, Dugam Durter, Keep King on a tube drip the Yopana, Sonum Cheva India, Din der Chijang, Destin D. Chu Nyojang, Chule Yang, Destit Gidmer, Jong with Sergi, Chudang Devani, Panson, the Troxun Rovala, Jean Rochette, Zandana Shinker note the Tonga Kura Tarta, Tambo, Gangim Batini, Taming Nirkison, Girnro, Nyamda, Jumte, Destit Gangshon, Chudang Chila, Nyambo, Long with the Renzen Review Bombago, Skitjang, Tingu Mazambe, Chu Jipi, Lecture Mandrover, Tadon. Destit Zervaji Gonda Rene, Tundam, Sha Mambu Ngala, Matsik Nimbur, Yang Tenit, Chirtrum Timber, Chirtrum Tuntum, the Jarva Chukshi, the September of Shao, Kumchuk Kajanda, Shanchip, Semjung of Dambala Teni, Kit, Lambden, Kerserso, Jayang, Yot Motiet, Rejik Desamo, Dreyan, Wenba Teni, Sarjan, Dan Churmer, Jean Gupaner, Dunger Lamkirdan, Jago. Ton tam la ten bag ngami shiso
Well, that was the oral transmission for transfer suffering and happiness into enlightenment, and now let's have the actual class on it. in this text, it has 3 main parts, and then that is initial statement, actual text, and concluding text. The main part talks about also 2 parts, and that is transforming suffering, and then the other transforming happiness into enlightenment. In terms of transforming suffering into enlightenment, it talks about through relative truth and through absolute truth. We've already talked about that. So today we then moved on to the second aspect of it, where we're going to talk about transforming happiness into enlightenment, which also has 2 aspects, that is through relative truth and absolute truth. I think many of you probably already gained some insights based on our previous teachings on how to transform suffering into enlightenment. I think if you can, once you receive this peace instruction, if you can keep that in mind, then later on in your life, you will be able to feel happy when suffering dawns on you instead of feeling suffering. And for those of you who are very confident, then you can make supplication to the spirits saying that, well, if you can, just give me all the obstacles and problems. Of course, that is when you are very confident. Sometimes when we have teachings as profound as this, and the corresponding circumstances just appear itself. For example, when we talk about transforming suffering into enlightenment, and naturally there are some problems would occur in your life, and then you would have opportunity to practice on it. And then at that time, you should think to yourself, this is wonderful. This is the city coming from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is because of the blessings of the 3 jewels. I am experiencing grave suffering. You can think in such a way, you can contemplate like this. Of course, it is completely up to you to practice. I really hope that every one of you could infuse the Dharma into your own mind, to be one with the Dharma. Because if you can do so, then even a short peace instruction like this, in a short period of life, then you can become a genuine practitioner. I think about it sometimes to myself, that nowadays we don't have many people listen to the Dharma over here, unlike a few years ago where we had a lot of people. And nowadays we have much less. But I think it's okay as well, because this kind of teaching, I think the recordings as well as the commentaries will be made available to others later on, and I think it will help other people to transform suffering into enlightenment and not retrogress on their own path. In fact, I think learning the Dharma is so very meaningful in this lifetime. It is not necessarily that you have to have a long preparation to study the Dharma. It is not necessarily that you have to be very eloquent to study the Dharma. In fact, as short as this title, if you can diligently practice upon this title, then in a short few classes, you can understand the genuine meaning, even if you didn't practice with great effort. But after a few years, you will definitely have lots of changes if you never give up on this. According to Jewel Forest of Dharma Garden, it says that if a person who lived for 100 years but being very lazy and not diligent in practice, it is not as worthy. Such kind of life is not as worthy as someone who practiced even for a day with diligence. In fact, there are people who stayed with their teacher for 20, 30 years, but if they don't have a sacred outlook, it is meaningless. There are people who later on, after staying with a teacher for 33 years, but at the end, not only they generated wrong view, they slandered self and others, and then ended up destroying self and others altogether. This kind of person, doesn't matter how long they've practiced, it is really not of much meaning. But if you can be very diligent, then short teachings as this teaching, if you can put it into your actual practice, then eventually one day you will be able to gain immeasurable benefit from it. The previous masters didn't spend a long time in the Dharma study, such as Chakalotsawa. He only went to India for a few years, but after he got back from India, he gained the essence of the Dharma. He studied the essence of Dharma, and he could genuinely propagate the Dharma as well as benefit sentient beings. Same applies to Master Fa Xian, who went to India. I think many of us, in fact, spend more time in studying than Master Fa Xian's time in India. Same as Ponsog Rinpoche, according to his biography, he only stayed in Sercho County for 6 years. Therefore, wherever we are, I'm sure we will encounter some obstacles and difficulties, but if you can transcend that, if you can immerse yourself, infuse your own mind into the Dharma, then eventually you will have the opportunity to propagate the Dharma as well as benefit all sentient beings. Especially, I think, for the young people nowadays, if you can put the effort, if you can be one with the Dharma, if you can infuse your mind with the Dharma, I'm sure in the future that you will have more opportunities.